Hello gamers, welcome to Game Recaps. In this video, I will discuss the storyline of the game What Remains of Edith Finch. An adventure game developed by Giant Sparrow and published by Annapurna Interactive. The game centers on the character of Edith, member of the Finch family, afflicted by a perceived curse that causes all but one member of each generation to die in unusual ways. The game was released for Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One in April 25, 2017, and for Nintendo Switch in 2019. Through beautiful visuals and exploration as the main elements, we will be brought into the story of each member of the Finch family, who certainly has a view on life and each other's secrets, tragedy, incident, and love mixed into one. Therefore, without further ado, I will start discussing the plot of the story. The story begins by showing a boy named Christopher, who is sitting while holding a diary belonging to his mother, Edith Finch. The diary chronicles Edith's investigation into the tragedy that killed her family. This game will dwell on the contents of Edith Finch's diary from the beginning of her investigation, until the cause of the death of the Finch family is revealed. The main protagonist in this game is Edith Finch, and the setting is in the past, before Christopher was born. Edith Finch is the only surviving member of the Finch family. After the death of her mother, Dawn, she bequeathed the Finch family home, which has now been abandoned for approximately 6 years. However, before dying, Dawn gave her daughter a key, without telling her what could be opened with the key. Therefore, at the age of 17, Edith decided to return to visit her family home to find out what her late mother was trying to convey by giving her the key.
Left me a key, but didn't tell me what it unlocked.
The last time Edith set foot in her family home was when she was 11 years old. Not much has changed since then. The furniture is still in its place, even things are left scattered about. This is because 6 years ago, Edith and her mother left the Finch family's house in a hurry, especially after one by one Finch's family members died, and they believed that the house was cursed. Edith then walks through the Finch family's house while thinking back to her childhood life, where once all members of the Finch family lived together under one roof, namely Edith's great-grandmother named Eddie, then there was Edith's mother, Dawn, and Edith's father, Sanjay, Edith's brothers, Louis and Milton, and Edith herself. There were actually 13 members of the Finch family who all lived in the house. Later, I will explain more about each of them as the story goes. Now, all the rooms in the Finch family residence are locked, because Dawn locked it after one of her sons, Milton, mysteriously disappeared. Dawn believes that the Finch family house has a curse, and for that reason, Dawn decides to leave the house with Edith 6 years ago. Now that she's back at the Finch's house, Edith is trying to find a door or object that could be opened using the key her mother gave her. After going through room after room in the house, Edith finally managed to find a padlocked book that could be opened using the key, and miraculously, a secret passage opened. The secret passage led Edith into the room of Molly, Edith's great-aunt, who died at the age of 10 in 1947. When reading Molly's diary, we are shown Molly's perspective on the day of her death, where that night, Molly felt very hungry because the little girl was put to sleep by her mother without eating dinner. To overcome her hunger, Molly began to eat things around her.
So I looked around for something to eat,
which are pet mouse food, toothpaste, and red berry decorations. In fact, Molly had thought about eating her pet fish, but she held back. After that, Molly jumped out the window and suddenly turned into a cat. She chased a bird until it fell and she suddenly turned into an owl. When she became an owl, Molly preyed on a rabbit and suddenly turned into a shark. Falling into the sea, she preys on the seal and Molly then turns into a monster and preys on humans. But since all that had not satisfied her hunger, Molly then went following the delicious, appetizing aroma through the sewers, until she finally reached her room, where Molly suddenly returned to her human form. On her bed, Molly explained that the monster was waiting for her under the bed, waiting to eat her, before Molly fell asleep, and that's the end of Molly Finch's story. Here, it is revealed that Molly died of poisoning. As a result of eating mouse food, toothpaste, and berry decorations, Molly imagines herself to be a cat, owl, shark, and a very hungry monster, before finally breathing her last in bed. Edith then drew Molly in the Finch family tree as a progress of the investigation she was doing. Through the ledge outside the window, Edith made it to Eddie, her great-grandmother's room. Eddie is the only member of the Finch family who has lived the longest to be 93 years old, so she has gone through every life and death of her siblings, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Eddie had 5 children, one of whom was Molly, who died from food poisoning. The other 4 children are Barbara, Calvin, Sam, and Walter, which I will discuss one by one later. Eddie and Edith's relationship as great-grandmother and great-granddaughter is quite close, and they often spend time together. Eddie's husband, Sven, died several years ago when he was hit by a dragon-shaped slide he was building. Through toy binoculars equipped with several news scrolls, Edith learns about the background of the Finch family and the great-great-grandfather, or more simply Eddie's father, named Odin Finch. From the very beginning, the inhabitants of Norway and Odin himself had believed that the girl of Finch's descent was cursed. Odin buried Johan, his own newborn son, along with his wife, Ingeborg, both of whom died during childbirth. On January 7, 1937, Odin took his family and home with him to Washington, hoping that they would be able to leave the curse that exists in the Finch family line and start a new life there. Unfortunately, in the middle of the voyage, the waves off the coast of Washington drowned his house and Odin himself. Odin doesn't survive, but his daughter, Eddie, and Eddie's husband, Sven, and their daughter Molly are stranded on the island of Orcas, where they end up building a new home, the home that the entire Finch family will live in. That was the beginning of the Finch family tree. Edith then drew Odin in her diary and continued to search for information about her ancestry. Through one of the books on the shelf entitled The Mystery of Death and What Happens After It, we learn that the Finch family is very obsessed with finding out what death means and what will happen after they die, where this obsession arises as a result of their belief in the curse of death that runs in the Finch family line. With the same key, Edith unlocked a book that led her to a secret passage. Well, please note that in every secret passage that Edith finds, there is always a scribble on the wall with the signature of Milton, Edith's brother who mysteriously disappeared. This secret passage leads Edith to the room of Calvin, one of Eddie's sons. Calvin is Sam's twin brother, where Sam is Edith's grandfather. But Sam never talked about Calvin. It is known that Calvin is passionate about all things outer space, and dreams of flying to become an astronaut. Through old notes written by Sam, Edith finally learns that Calvin falls to his death from swinging off the edge of a cliff at 11 years old in 1961.
The day he made up his mind to fly.
Through another secret passage, where there are also Milton's signature scribbles, Edith finally reaches the room of Barbara, Calvin, and Sam's older sister. Barbara was a former child artist who died at the age of 16 in 1960, and her death can be identified through a comic book. As a child artist, Barbara was famous for her very distinctive scream. But with age, the screams are no longer the same, which is normal and happens to everyone. One night, Barbara's father, Sven, accidentally slipped and was injured, so he had to be rushed to the hospital as soon as possible. Barbara was then asked to stay home and look after her younger brother, Walter. Barbara then spends the night with her boyfriend, Rick, practicing her screams. But despite repeated attempts, Barbara still couldn't get her screams back from when she was a child. While practicing, suddenly a voice came from the basement. Barbara immediately took the basement key hidden in the handle of the music box. But since Rick had gone out for a while, Barbara decided to wait for him before going into the basement. 20 minutes passed, Rick didn't come back, so Barbara decided to enter the basement alone, where the girl was surprised by Rick, who deliberately scared Barbara to get her trademark scream back.
Oh dear!
But it was in vain, and Barbara became very angry and locked Rick in the basement. Barbara then went back upstairs and fell asleep on the sofa, clutching one of Rick's crutch. Hours later, Walter's screams from upstairs woke Barbara, who immediately rushed to her little brother's room, where Barbara was attacked by Hookman. Barbara manages to fight the man and knock him out. But when she went downstairs, Hookman was nowhere to be seen. The doorbell suddenly rang, and as Barbara was about to open the door, the girl was surprised by her fans wearing monster costumes from the films that Barbara had starred in throughout her career. Barbara happily uses her last breath to scream. Before the police arrive to investigate the case of Barbara and Rick's disappearance, where the only thing left of Barbara is one of her earpieces that was in the music box. The story in the comic is a subtle depiction of what really happened to Barbara. It's possible that Barbara has star syndrome, but unfortunately, there are some fans who are so obsessed with Barbara that they kidnap and kill Barbara that night. Barbara's screams that are told in the comics are a picture of Barbara's last real scream when the girl was really scared. After learning that the basement key was hidden in the music box handle, Edith rushed to get it and went to the basement, a place that had been forbidden to enter when she was a child. From there, Edith made it to Walter's secret bunker, Eddie's youngest son. Walter had been hiding in the bunker because he was traumatized by the death of his older sister Barbara. On the night of Barbara's abduction, Walter hid under the bed, watching it all. After living in the bunker for approximately 30 years, Walter finally died at the age of 53 in 2005. By reading Walter's diary, Edith finds out how Walter's life was while in the bunker, and tries to maintain his sanity with the same routine every day. Until one day, Walter decided to get out of the bunker to find the person who had killed Barbara. When he was outside, Walter then walked on the railroad tracks saying that he didn't care anymore when death would come for him, and just at that moment, the train was speeding towards him, crashing and killing Walter instantly. Edith then follows Walter's footsteps out of the bunker, where she finds the grave dedicated to Walter. After that, Edith climbed a flight of stairs and tried to reach the room of Sam, Calvin's twin brother and grandfather. In the middle of her trip, Edith said that she was 22 weeks pregnant. That was the reason why Edith decided to revisit the Finch family home, start an investigation into the deaths of all her family members, and tell the story of the Finch family to the child she was carrying. Arriving at Sam's room, Edith told that her grandfather loved hunting and had previously served in the military. In addition, Sam also often captures moments by taking photos using his old camera. It is these photos that explain how Sam finally died at the age of 33 in 1983. One day, Sam takes his daughter Dawn on a hunt. During the hunt, Dawn was so fond of taking pictures of her father that the girl found a deer on the hill and told him. Sam then teaches Dawn how to hunt deer, and Dawn manages to shoot it right on target.
Great shot, Dawn!
To capture the moment for Dawn's success, Sam then set up the camera and set the time, before then running up the hill to take pictures with Dawn and the deer that she shot. However, just as Sam lifted the deer's head, he was rammed by the deer and fell from the top of the hill and died instantly. After learning the cause of Sam's death, Edith finds a divorce contract addressed to Sam by his wife, Kay. In the contract, Sam expresses deep regret over the death of Gregory, their one-year-old son. One day, in 1977, Kay was bathing Gregory in the bathtub and letting him play with his toys. A few minutes later, Kay came and drained the water in the bathtub. Just then, Kay received a call from Sam. Unfortunately, while Kay was answering Sam's phone, Gregory, who was left alone in the bathtub, used his toy to turn the faucet back on. Unattended by Kay, tap water filled the tub and drowned Gregory. This incident led to the divorce of Sam and Kay. In addition to the divorce contract, Edith also found a poem written by Dawn, which tells about the death of Gus, her younger brother and Gregory's older brother, who died at the age of 13 in 1982. The day Gus died coincided with the day Sam married his new wife after divorced Kay. Gus is forced to attend the wedding, even though the boy insists that he doesn't want to have a stepmother. That day, suddenly the weather turned bad, where there was a thunderous roar and a strong wind that flew all the furniture everywhere. Everyone rushed into the tent, but Gus stayed outside, busy kite flying. As time went on, the wind was blowing harder and harder until one of the tents was blown away and hit Gus, instantly killing him. Since Gus' death, Dawn has spent most of her time in the attic, away from her brother's room. Dawn had time to travel to India, where she finally met her soulmate, Sanjay, and got married. Dawn and Sanjay have 3 children, namely Louis, Milton, and Edith. However, in 2002, Dawn had to give up her husband who died in an earthquake. After her husband's death, Dawn decides to take her 3 children back to the Finch family residence. Edith then began to learn about Milton, his older brother who mysteriously disappeared at the age of 10 in 2003. Through a flipbook, it is seen that Milton is drawing the figure of a king who suddenly moves and drops a magic brush. Milton then took the magic brush and started making a flipbook, in which it was about him creating a door and entering it. Remember, in every secret passage that Edith found, there was always a scribble of Milton's, and Edith always said that Milton had disappeared mysteriously, as if swallowed by this house. Maybe Milton accidentally fell into the sea while circling the house, or maybe the boy was locked in a room and never found. Unfortunately, no definite clues were found regarding Milton's death. He just disappeared. After learning a little about Milton, Edith then went to Lewis, her oldest brother's room, where Edith told about how she often spent time playing video games with Lewis. Through a note left by a psychiatrist who treated Lewis, Edith gets information about Lewis, who died at the age of 21 in 2010. Edith also learns that Dawn helped Lewis get a job at a fish cannery, where Lewis was assigned to cut off fish heads. The routine that Lewis does every day makes him start to hallucinate into a king who has great power, and is on a mission to rule the whole world. Even though Lewis knew it was all just his imagination, he didn't care, because compared to reality, his imagination was much more fun. Going deeper into his imagination, Lewis saw himself doing his job, looking like a robot. Lewis then mounted the grinding machine and entered the glowing gate, where he as king was greeted by his people with joy because it was the day he was crowned a king. Happily, Lewis knelt down to be crowned with the royal crown. However, right at that moment, the screen darkened and there was a sound like a knife cutting. It indicated how Lewis had sunk so deep into his hallucinations that he had difficulty distinguishing imagination from reality, and unknowingly cut off his own head with a cutting machine. Edith then wrote a story about the death of Eddie, her great-grandmother who died at the age of 93 in 2010. Her last day was when she had dinner with Dawn and Edith, at which time the Finch family was only the three of them. At dinner, Dawn expresses her desire to take Eddie and Edith away from the house the next morning, because according to Dawn, the house has a curse. Hearing this, Eddie refuses to go and insists on staying, which infuriates Dawn and orders Edith to go to her room while she continues arguing with Eddie. Edith, who chose to go to the library, overheard an argument between her mother and her great-grandmother, where Eddie insisted on telling Edith what was really going on in the Finch family. But Dawn went against her wishes because she thought it would only exacerbate the curse that had already been occurred. To end the argument, Dawn said that she would take Edith away tonight, while Eddie would be picked up by the nursing home staff the next morning. Inside the library, Edith finds the Finch family history book written by Eddie. Through the book, Eddie also explains that right on Edith's birthday, an earthquake shook the ocean, causing the sea water to recede so that Odin Finch's house, which had previously sunk, reappeared on the sea surface. Therefore, Eddie decided to visit the house. But in the middle of the journey, suddenly a thick fog blocked the vision. Arriving at Odin's house, Eddie saw that one of the rooms in the house had the light on, and Eddie could not explain what she saw in there. Still, Edith had not finished reading her great-grandmother's book. Suddenly her mother came and took the book,
Mom, you're gonna rip it, let go!
then took Edith to the car and left the Finches that very night. The next morning, the employee who worked at the nursing home came to pick up Eddie, but they found Eddie was already dead. Eddie died alone in the house, with no family to accompany her. Several years later, Dawn fell ill and died at the age of 48 in 2016. But before dying, Dawn left Edith with a key so that her daughter could find out for herself what really happened to the Finch family. The fact that Dawn finally allowed Edith to find out the truth behind the mystery of the deaths of all members of the Finch family indicates that Dawn has realized that the curse that she had believed in running in the Finch family lineage was only made up. Therefore, Dawn gives Edith the freedom to find out the truth about the Finch family and believe what she wants to believe. After the death of her mother, Edith feels very lonely because now Edith is the only member of the Finch family who is still alive. Edith herself wrote a diary for Christopher. At the end of her diary, Edith describes a life that feels very strange and short. Actually, Edith wanted to tell the whole story about the Finch family to Christopher directly, but fate said otherwise because Edith had to die after bringing Christopher into this world. Well, that's the whole storyline of the What Remains of Edith Finch game, which is quite in-depth and gives a little idea about mental illness, and also a way of looking at life from two different sides, where Dawn sees a life that is cursed because she was born as a member of the Finch family. On the other hand, Eddie sees life as something magical and wondrous and worth fighting for, no matter what happens in it. If you have other opinions about this game, feel free to write them in the comments column. Thank you for watching.